This is barley, an essential ingredient in beer.
Barley will be delivered here, malted barley will be delivered here, depending on the different varieties and colours we need. We'll then mill it, which is crushing the barley to break out the sugars, because you've got to get the sugar. The only reason you use barley principally, as opposed to wheat or oats or anything else as your principal ingredient, is because it has the right kind of sugar. Malted barley has sugar inside it that we'll be able to break down in our brewing process, because it's starch as opposed to maltose, which is small chains of sugar basically. If you remember school chemistry, you've got sort of long chains of sugar, which is starch, then it breaks down into maltose and dextrose and things like that. We want the small chains. So we break it down in our breweries. We get the starch from our barley, we break it down, we extract it, and the colour and the protein, which is a bit more flavour out of the barley. We then add water to it, so we can then dilute it out, leave the grain behind. We then got a liquid. We then boil that liquid, which will then sterilize it to make it safe, obviously, and remove some more of the proteins you don't want, which helps the beer in stability at the end of it when it's in the bottle and in the glass.
Hops are then added into during the process, which help with the stability and keeps the beer safer for longer, and the aromas from the hops create fantastic flavours for the beer. Different beers will have different flavours depending on the variety of hop used. Then yeast is added in, which eats up the sugars, which turns the sugars into small chain sugars into alcohol, which is exactly what beer producers are looking for. Then is put into a bottle, can, barrel or a keg, ready for distribution. Hops are one of the lesser known ingredients in beer. People often know little bits about barley and little bits about yeast, but they know not much about hops. Well, I headed to the Hogsback Brewery to find out more about this little known ingredient.
Hops are notorious for brewing with beer. They produce the flavours, the bitterings and so on. It's one of the four major ingredients that go into the beer, apart from water, yeast, grain and of course hops. And in this area of Surrey, we were the first county in the country to actually grow and cultivate hops for the brewing industry, well before any other parts of the country. Following the summer months, the hop you want to try and remain dormant as long as possible because you want it to conserve its energy. As you can see, the hops actually grow to quite a height, and through that the crop needs lots of vigour. So you try to persuade it and battle against nature to stop the crop from growing until around about April time, and then the shoots will reappear in May, and then has about 6 weeks up until the Midsummer's Day, the 21st of June, to reach the tops.
Traditionally, it was used for a number of things. One is a preservative. So you've heard the expression IPA, you can see it these days. And IPA is all about heavily hopped beers as a preservative when the beer was being transported from the British Empire over to India. Now, why we use hops in modern beers, two main reasons: bitterness and aroma. There's lots of other reasons, but they're the two main reasons. So the oils in the hops, once you put them in the boil of the actual brewing process, that will convert those chemicals in, so it'll give you a bitterness to the beer. What we also do as well is we want some of those oils to give it some lovely aromas, so we add them different times in the brewery to give you different characteristics. So we add them very late in the brew house, and that will give you aroma where you might not want bitterness. What we also do is we add them further down the process in ferment, even conditioning further down, and that is what we call dry hopping. And again, that's for giving you that aroma in beer.
You ferment in here. So you run in our unfermented beer into one of these tanks, you fill it up, you then add in yeast, which will either be a liquid or a dried yeast powder, a bit like making bread, it's the same sort of idea. You then pour that in the top, and then you essentially leave it. So it ferments, it bubbles, it eats up all the sugars, and it then turns those sugars into alcohol. It's a direct correlation. There's this much sugar. If that goes down that much, you're going to get this much alcohol. So if you want 4%, you go like that. If you want 5%, you go like that. 6% like that. And that's it. It takes about a week to make an ale, which we do in these square tanks, and it takes about a month to make a lager, which we do in these tanks.